Dear students, we are now moving to our next section of our unit first, and this section will be completing in our three lectures, and this will be about cell recognition or cell communication, or even we call it as cell, what is called as signaling, or cell what communication. So whether you call it cell-cell interaction or cell-cell recognition or cell communication or cell signaling, it means the same, that we need to understand how the plasma membrane of more than one cell enable them to show intercellular adhesion, communication, recognition, and attachment of the cell to the cytoskeletal elements of the cytoplasm, as well as to the extracellular matrix. So that will be all we'll be dealing in the cell recognition aspect. As I told you that we'll be discussing this section in three lectures, and today we will be discussing it is introductory remarks to understand how the cell recognition basically happens and how the different cells bound by the membrane are able to communicate or adhere or receive or send signals with each other. Now, first tell me, can you imagine what would happen if our brain could not command or tell our leg muscles to contract? Can we walk? Can we do other things? No. Or for the time being, our bladder forgets to receive. Our bladder could not tell our brain that you need to go to the washroom, or we need to go to the washroom and empty the bladder. Or what if you or we contract infection, or our immune system fails to deal with it? That means our immune cells fail to communicate with one another for a coordinated effort to destroy the infectious agent. So for that purpose, we say that cells need to be able to communicate with each other to these things, and if they fail to do these things, our physiology doesn't work properly and we suffer. So that's the significance of cell recognition or cell communication. And there are different types of cell-cell interactions or cell recognition events, and some of these interactions are basically meant for big molecules that enter and exit the cell through the process called as endocytosis, and the process called exocytosis, through which the bigger molecules leave the cell. And for smaller particles like amino acids and some ions, and even for different types of solutes, as you know, there are different types of direct contacts possible between the cells, and that is called as gap junctions. We will take up those gap junctions later on in our lectures. So mutual recognition between cells, usually by specific complementary interactions between the cells, happens through surface molecules or membrane glycoproteins are part of the membrane structure, or in which a cell recognizes or identifies not only its environment of the extracellular matrix but also the environment of other cells. So therefore cell recognition is one of the ways by which cells communicate with one another, and generally it is possible, as I told you, through specific cellular what is called as interaction or addition molecules present on the surface of the cell on the plasma membrane itself, and generally we call those molecules as integrins or selectins or adenosines, or what's called as Ig immunoglobulins type of superfamily. So again we will be taking up these interaction molecules later on in our lectures. So what then does mean by the cell recognition is that the cell recognition is the cell's ability to distinguish one type of neighboring cell from another, and this phenomenon occurs when complementary molecules on opposing cell surfaces meet. For example, how it happens is a receptor on one cell surface binds to its specific ligand on the nearby cell, initiating a cascade of what is called as biochemical events, which basically enable a cell to come to know about its environment. So that means cell recognition occurs when two molecules present on the membrane or different cells bind to each other. They activate a response for communication or cooperation or transport or growth of the cells or defense of the body or the cellular system. So rather than including or inducing a distal response like the secretion of hormones, the binding of the cells also requires that the signaling molecules be in close proximity with each other in order to initiate the process of cell communication or cell recognition. And generally, we say these whole events can be broadly studied under two main categories. One is called as intrinsic recognition of the cells, and that is called as extrinsic recognition. Now, intrinsic recognition means when the cells that are part of the same organism associate with one another for the cell interaction, as well as extrinsic recognition means when the cells of one organism are recognized from the different organism. For example, when the microorganisms enter a body, how our immune cells are able to recognize these cells, it is through the extrinsic mechanism. So that is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic mechanism. And as I told you earlier that there are basically a number of cell surface molecules which are able to basically enable the cells to show different types of interaction, and generally we call those interaction molecules, they can be either cadherins or the immunoglobulins per families, or selectins or mucins and integrins. So these are some important cell recognition molecules. And importantly, the cell adhesion involving the cadherins and the selectins are basically dependent on the calcium ions, while as the integrins and Ig superfamily do not depend upon the calcium ion for their action to enable the cells to communicate with each other. So these molecules, basically, whatever they are, they complete the binding process of different cell membranes through the proteins, carbohydrates, or even the glycolipids or glycoproteins, and resulting in the cell recognition. Especially the role of carbohydrates is very important in this process. And generally, the signaling in the cell recognition happens through either paracrine mode or endocrine mode or autocrine mode, or even direct signaling across the cells. So these were the introductory remarks on the cell recognition. Inshallah, we will be taking up all these in detail in our next lectures.